Hello and welcome to Unacademy. I welcome you all to this marathon, a one shot marathon in which we'll cover all the architectural features and architecture of medieval India. I'll let you know what are the major topics we are going to cover, what is the way we are going to conduct this session, and we will also try to learn through visuals because when we talk about architecture, the biggest issue is we tend to go through bookish knowledge and that is textual. So when we have only text, it becomes difficult to understand architecture. So what we'll do is we'll try to understand everything through images. So good evening to all of you. Now, before we begin, remember that the 19999 offer is going to end tonight, and you have to use the code IS English to be tagged to our team. This is a must because if you will not use this code, you will not be tagged to the English team. Over and above that, you will not get the least price possible with regards to the subscription itself. Now, when we talk about medieval India, there are 4 to 5 very important thematics which UPSC generally goes into. So, the way we are going to cover everything is when we talk about architecture for medieval, the first discussion which we are going to have is Delhi Sultanate. So, early medieval architecture and ancient, I will cover separately if needed in a different marathon itself. Then we'll talk about Vijayanagara. This is another very important thematic within the medieval architectural theme. Then we'll go into Lodhis, again, major contribution and very important for the examination. Thereafter, we'll do the Mughals. This is the major chunk and very critical for the examination. A lot of questions can be made out of here and have come also in that regard. And we'll end with the Marathas. Marathas, because their architecture was recently added into UNESCO. This may be something which you already know or may have gone through with me in different sessions within the military landscape. But the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, these are 5 components. Till the fourth, it is very, very important for both prelims and mains. This is a very important point you have to understand. I will not presume that you know this. I will teach you from the basics itself. And when we talk about pre mains, we can get statement based questions out of this area. At the same point of time, you can get mains questions about architectural features. Period based history is already coming. We've seen Pallava. We've already seen Pallava. We have seen Chola. We've seen Gupta. Now it is the time they move to Chandelas. Now there's a chance that they move into medieval. So, keeping that in mind, we have chosen this topic. And in the next 2.5 hours, I'll try to give you a comprehensive understanding with some visual referencing. Now, if everybody's here, everybody's ready, I would like this to be a two-way interaction. So please do tell me that I can start and we all are in the right zone in that regard. We don't make it into a monologue, we make it into a two-way interaction. That is the most important aspect. I want to conduct this session in a way that you understand and you keep on telling me that you are following me. That is the most important thing here. Yes, sir? Great. Are the chats in front of me? Great. Okay. Now, when we talk about ancient and early medieval, to just to give you a taste of what ancient and early medieval means, is that we start with IVC, with IVC architecture. Then we move to what is called as Stupa, Chaitya, Vihara, and pillar architecture of the Mauryan period. This is one thematic which is called Buddhist architecture. And thereafter, when we enter into the Gupta post Gupta period, which is Gupta early medieval period, the most important concept is, and I've done a static video on that also, which is temple architecture. Which is temple architecture. Here we already know about Nagara, Dravida, Vesara, and it is this shift towards the period of what is called as Turkish invasion and thereafter into Delhi Sultanate that we see a new style of architecture rising, and that is what we have to discuss. That is the whole point of this discussion. This is a presume section. If we need a session like this, you just comment in the comment section. after the session that you would like me to conduct a marathon on what is called as architecture of ancient and early medieval. If that works for you, if there is enough demand for that, I'll cover that also. Medieval I chose because this is an area which students tend to ignore, and UPSC is slowly but surely moving towards Chandela, so it is very good chance that they move into the architecture of medieval in that regard. So we'll try to conduct that also, but your comment is your vote on getting something like this done. Now let's start with Delhi Sultanate. Now, before we talk about Delhi Sultanate, what is the architecture which prevailed in the Indian subcontinent, and what are the features with regards to that? Now, the architecture which prevailed before Delhi Sultanate, before 1206, we are discussing 1206 onwards in that regard. It is temple architecture. Temple architecture is based on grandeur, it is based on structural temples, brick temples. They are what is called as tributed structures. And tributed structures means that they are based on a principle of column and slab or beam and slab concept, which is that they will make a roof like this and they will make rows and columns, pillars like this as load bearing. These are called load bearing slabs. Basically, they take the load of the ceiling. These are called tributed structures. And most of the buildings which we see, be it the mandapas, be it the shikharas, be it the Ardh Mandap, they all have this very interesting feature, which is their pillared halls. They are pillared halls. Now, pillared halls is a very interesting feature of the early medieval architecture or ancient architecture. But Delhi Sultanate changes this concept. And that is where this is the inauguration of what is called as Indo Islamic architecture. Indo Islamic architecture. Indo because it has a lot of elements which were taken from the temples also. Islamic because the basic thematic is Islamic in that sense. So Indo Islamic architecture, Delhi Sultanate is the inaugural phase of that. Now, Delhi Sultanate architecture. Delhi Sultanate architecture is divided into four phases. Very important for the examination. First phase is called reuse phase. The second phase is called the innovative phase, where there are new elements which are added. The third phase is called you can say highest point, zenith if you want to say. And phase 4 is the decline phase. Is the decline phase. Now, within this concept, we need to know where the timeline also sets in or where the timeline fits in. Meaning, when we talk about phase 1, this is Qutubuddin Aibak. Phase 2 is Aibak Iltutmish till Alauddin Khilji. Third phase is the Tughlaqs, but till Muhammad bin Tughlaq. And fourth phase is Firoz Shah Tughlaq onwards. Meaning, if you are not structuring your answer in such a way that you understand these four phases, at the same point of time, your mains answer has to reflect this progression also. You can also be asked in prelims that what are the phases or what the phases represent. So it is important that you have this overall structure in your mind that I have to go through four phases and each phase has a very important, you can say, progression in that regard. Now, let's talk about phase one. Let's talk about phase one. And when we talk about phase one in that regard, the idea is very simple, that it is a phase which is marked by reuse of existing building. Now, you should also know the reason, because that would be a certain aspect which you may have to write in the examination. The reason for that is political instability. Political instability, that this is something which does not allow the rulers to, or Delhi sultans to, introduce something new. And this is specific to Kutubuddin Aibak. Because Kutubuddin Aibak, whilst severing his ties from Central Asia, he cannot introduce new buildings because he's still trying to figure out how his political landscape will look like. And this is where two very important structures are there. One is called Kuwait ul Islam Mosque. This is within Kila Rai Pithora, now known as the Qutub complex. So it is first the use of a Tomar Chauhan structure itself, Indraprasth Kila Rai Pithora, and within it a mosque which is called Kuwaitul Islam. Now, if you look at the mosque, automatically you will know that it's based on reuse, because the pillars are temple pillars, and the pillars are indicative of a structure which is not consonant with mosques. Mosques are based on very open halls. This is a pillared hall. This is because next to the Kuwaitul Islam Mosque, there is a mention that 27 temple structures were used to create this structure itself. So that is why even these pillars are not similar. Different temples, reuse, the temples that went into disuse, whatever it may have been. The idea is they're using, mixing and matching the roof and the pillars in that. So this is based on a Vishnu temple assemblage, which was there in the Mehroli complex in that regard. The second is called Adhai Din Ka Jhopada, that is in Ajmer, and this is considered to be a Jain monastery. This was a Jain monastery. Again, as you can see inside, it is a pillared hall structure. This is all happening between 1206 to 1210, the initial phase in that regard. And Jain monastery was used even before that, 1194, 1196. This is the period when these structures are coming through. This is where where just before the laying down of the foundation of the Qutub Minar, this is the structure complex, or this is the complex structure which exists in that regard. So this is where phase one, you have two examples. These two examples are indicative. One, Kuwait ul Islam Mosque, and second, the Adhai Din Ka Gopra. These two structures are reused structures, and one is considered temple complex and the other one is a Jain monastery. Now, this phase, there is no addition. Very important point. No addition or no new element is added, because this is a phase where they're just trying to use whatever they find. So any element based question where they're saying that Kutubuddin Aibak was the one who fundamentally changed the landscape of the architecture in India, that statement is incorrect, because Kutubuddin Aibak laid the foundation for it, but he may not have contributed directly to innovation. So this leads us to the second phase, which is phase 2. This is marked by the foundation of the Mehrauli Qutub complex and with the foundation of Qutub Minar. The foundation will be laid by Aibak. It will be completed under Iltutmish. It will also see certain additions under Firoz Shah Tughlaq, and even the British added certain, you can say, certain structure on the top of Firoz Shah Tughlaq's understanding. 6 floors were there, not five. It's called Smith's Folly, which we'll discuss. So Qutub Minar we'll discuss separately. The idea is very simple. With the establishment of the Qutub complex, with the establishment of the Qutub Minar, now multiple elements will be introduced which were maybe known in the Indian subcontinent but were not used properly in the Indian subcontinent. And this is the phase where multiple new innovations will come. Now, those innovations are based on something which Aybak, Iltutmish, and the Turks or the Turkeys as they call knew and had seen in Central Asia, which is called dome and arch structures. Now, what do I mean by dome and arch? See, dome and arch both were known in the Indian subcontinent, but the right scientific way of making them was not known. Meaning, if they used to make a dome, it was very shallow domes you will see on certain temples, very shallow domes. And if you will see an arch, it would actually be a trebeted structure like this. And they will then stick two stones here to make it into a certain arch. This is not a true arch. This is not a true dome. These are not true dome or true arch structures. They are similar to it, but they are not true arch, true dome. True means with the right scientific understanding. Now, as I said, because they need mosque structures, they need to create mosques. They have this understanding that they need open pavilions with no pillars. And this is a very important point you have to understand, that they want structures which are open, which are having airy nature, and they should be able to enter it. There should be no pillar because they have to pray. And when they have to pray, they have to pray with this. If there are pillars in between, it is not a aesthetic structure. And within Islamic understanding, as it is, the dome is considered to be like the skyline. It's like the skyline. How the earth is in a way engulfed by the dome. The whole, you can say, sky looks like a dome itself. That is where that understanding comes through, that we want to have a pleasing skyline and open structures. Now, for creating a structure like this, where you have open airy rooms with no pillars and the roof is not in a way held by something, then they had to bring in what is called as the Turkish dome. This is a Turkish dome, the iconic blue domes of Istanbul in that regard. This is needed. This is needed to create this. So, what is a true arch, true dome? Let's try to understand that. Now, the first innovation. So let's discuss the first major development. The first major development during this period of 1206 onwards towards the period till Alauddin Khilji, the first major point is introduction of true arch and true dome. True arch, true dome is important in the way that, see, you may have to make this in the examination also. A true arch, a true arch has a keystone keystone, and it is freestanding. It is freestanding. So the arch has nothing as a certain, you can say, element which holds this weight. This freestanding. This is called a true arch. True arch, where these elements, unlike a arch where there is two pillars holding the roof like this and then made like this is a true arch. This is an arch, but this is a true arch. This is true way of making, scientific way of making arches. What arches do is that when there is a wall, they are able to distribute the weight quite well. Meaning, if there's an arch like this, they are able to distribute the weight quite well, and this allows for single entry point without need for pillars. The need for pillars. But if you have to make a structure, a pavilion, very open and needs, you can say, end to end vision, you have to use arches with domes. Now, what is a dome? See, domes are made first by creating an octagonal, you can say, understanding octagonal structure like this, and then they basically are trying to make a circle, and then they create a certain hemispherical addition. This is called a dome. Dome is hollow, meaning from the floor itself, it is a hollow structure. You look up. The more you are confident, the more loftier the dome you can make. More loftier the dome you can make, and that will give the structure a more, you can say, airy feel. And this dome structure, as you can see here, allows, from the inside it looks like this, from the outside it looks like this allows for having a pleasing skyline. But in order to create a dome, you need what are called as a squinch. Squinches are very, very important. Now, what do I mean by a squinch? See, look at this corner. Look at this corner. The weight has to be distributed. Now, if you have to distribute the weight, you have to use a squinch. Meaning, what they do is, it's a very simple, straightforward process. They first create these squinches. So it's a complex of squinches together. It's very scientific in that regard. This allows for this allows for a certain weight to be distributed over the squinch. They create over the squinch. They create this spherical octagonal structure. Over that, they will create the dome, and they will add arches here so that the arches allow for further weight distribution. Further weight distribution. So this is a squinch which is always in the corner. This is an arch which is an entry gate. This is a dome. These three structures, if they come together, you get a perfect structure. But till Alauddin, squinches were not very common. Squinches were not very common. So true dome and true arch was there. True dome and true arch was there. But squinches will become very common after Alauddin, which I will discuss with you in the Alai Darwaza. Before the Alai Darwaza, squinches are not very common. But these three are needed to create a proper structure. So the first contribution is true arch, true dome. Anybody has any should understanding this much. That what is a true arch, true dome. Yes, sir means we are perfectly fine, sir. Let's move forward very quickly. Because to create this structure, you need a new innovation. And that is the most important contribution of the Delhi Sultan. Sorted? Okay. Now, the second element which they introduced is called limestone mortar. See, in order to hold these structures properly, in order to hold these bricks in such a way, you need something which can bind them, but at the same point of time should not be very heavy. Because if the binding element if the binding element is very heavy, what will happen is that the structure will not be able to hold on to its own weight in that regard. This is where they introduced a new type of mortar. Think of it like a glue, where limestone gypsum were mixed together. And this was very lightweight also, but at the same point of time, it was also very strong. Meaning to create a dome and you can say arch structure, you need a good binding element, which is limestone mortar. This is one of the most important elements which they introduced, which will become like a stepping stone for Indo-Islamic architecture. Indo-Islamic architecture is only possible if limestone mortar is used, because domes and arch cannot be made by old school, you can say, binding agents, because that structure will become so heavy, it will not be able to hold on without pillars in that. Third is that just because true arch and true dome came, that does not mean that beam and lintel structures did not remain. Beam and slab structures, slab structures, what are called as trebuchet structures, which you see here, which is beam and trebuchet structure, this still remains and it still persists. It's not that it is just vanishes on one day, it still persists. But it is an element where now in this limestone mortar is used. And with limestone mortar, these structures become more, you can say, hardy, they become more durable, and you can create more elements with the same concept itself. So, true arch, true dome does not mean that tributed structures are fully out of context. They still remain, they still persist. Now, the next innovation, I'm writing it in point wise fashion because you may be expected to write it in the examination in the same way. The next most important structure, or you can say element which was added, is decorative pattern. And the word used is called arabesque. Arabesque. Now, what is the issue in decoration? See, within Islam, the you cannot represent human, animal, or flora fauna elements because it is considered un-Islamic to do so. You cannot recreate what Allah has created, what God has created. So within Islam, there is limitation. And that limitation is the way we used to create, we used to represent Mithuns, we used to create Ganga, Yamuna, Dwarpals, lot of image, you can say image elements were added into a temple. That cannot be added because that is not allowed. So but the Delhi Sultans wanted to decorate their structures. That is where they introduce what is called as geometric patterns. They also use the Quranic verses in calligraphic understanding. This is called Kufi. And what is even more interesting is they very liberally borrow Hinduistic elements, which is the swastik, the lotus, the floral design, and this is the master stroke. This is the master stroke. Because it is Hinduistic element, it is already outside Islam. And when it is outside Islam, it can be allowed. Whatever is considered as a motive within Islam itself cannot be used. But what can be used is un-Islamic elements. So therefore, they will borrow very liberally and create these forms of patterns, very beautiful ones. This is the Qutub Minar. What you see here is called Kufi, which is the Quranic verses are in very beautiful fashion carved into rock. They will use geometric designs such as this to actually make the structure look very beautiful. At the same point of time, they will use these motifs. Motifs mean designs which were previously used in temples. It's a very standard temple based design. So if somebody objected to the fact that why are you adding elements of floral, they said that this is not floral, this is Hinduistic. And therefore, it is outside the preview of Islam. Therefore, it is part of a different religion. Therefore, I can use it. So they found a loophole. And that loophole is that they can use elements which previously were used very commonly and were very, very standard in that regard, but now can be used as an exception. This whole you can say concept is called arabesque. Arabesque is a word which is used for using swastik, bell motif, lotus, decorative design called the idea of the Quranic verses, the red sandstone which was used. All together, the design and decoration is called arabesque. This word is expected in the examination, and you should be able to also identify in the prelims examination. They can simply ask you what does it mean, what does it refer to. They can ask you elements out of it also. What is arabesque? What does it mean? So, fourth major innovation is in decoration. Now, all these elements can be seen in the Qutub complex. But before we go to the Qutub complex, let's try to summarize the major elements. In phase 2, the following things have been introduced by the Delhi Sultan. First is true arch, true dome, arabesque, limestone mortar, and use of riveted structures along with accurate structures. Accurate structure is what you see, which is pillarless. Pillarless. But as I said, arch and dome was known previously, but the right technique was not known. Right technique was not known. This is where the second phase is very important. Now, in the Qutub complex, there are multiple elements. Meaning, the first is obviously the Kuwaitul Islam Mosque. This structure which you see here is called the Kuwaitul Islam. This is the first. This is the reuse phase. Then you have the Qutub Minar, very important. Then you have Iltutmish's tomb, very important again. This is the structure, Iltutmish tomb. Then you have the second phase, in a way, reaches to its culmination point in what is called as Alai Darwaza. Alai Darwaza. This is the second phase where it gets sorted. We have the Alai Minar in the side, Alai Minar in the side, and all of these elements were added during Alauddin Khilji and Iltutmish. But this is where we have to study two things. First, what is so special about Qutub Minar? And second, what is so special about Iltutmish tomb? And third, why is Alai Darwaza so important, and how is it completing the second phase of this whole structure or this discussion? Now, when we talk about the Qutub Minar, now the foundation, this is in itself a very interesting, you can say, juxtaposition. There is the iron pillar of Chandragupta to Vikramaditya in the structure. In order to say that if you make a victory minar, when Vidisha was captured and in a way conquered by the Tomars, the iron pillar was brought in from Vidisha. Now, in order to commemorate their victory, they did a pillar. So Kutubuddin Aibak said that if victory is commemorated through pillars, I will create a pillar which is in a way 72 meters high, and this is where the Minar or the Qutub Minar comes. Now, Qutub Minar, if you will see, has one very interesting feature, that it is a ribbed pattern. ribbed pattern. One rib is like this, which is spherical. One rib is like this. It is made like this with pointed, and these are the ribs which you will see around it. This ribbing allows for the structure to look bigger than what it is. It actually gives a lofty understanding, but also it makes sure that there's no obstruction in the way you can look up towards the top. So the ribbing which we see like this, which makes this minar very interesting, you can say choice of the architect to make sure that the minar looks very big, but also you can see it as a ladder to heaven, a ladder towards the sky, towards the dome in that regard. But if you look at the elements, you will realize that one, two, three, four, five. Five, you can say stories are there. Three look alike, two don't. The reason is that originally this was four stories when it was created by Kutubuddin Aibak and Iltutmish. Then the fourth story will be destroyed by lightning. So Firoz Shah Tughlaq is going to then add the fourth, but he will add one more. So he will make it a five-story structure. But because by the time we go to Firoz Shah Tughlaq, marble had become very common. He will use marble elements to create a different, you can say, structure itself. But what is even more interesting is when during the colonial period there was a lightning strike again on this structure, and a sixth element was added here. It's called a Capola. It's a very British, very British type small, you can say, topping element is there. That Capola, when it was added, Harding hated it. It was added by a person called Smith. Harding, the viceroy, hated it. It said that it is not looking like a good structure itself. That cupola was removed. And in the Qutub complex, you will find a small cupola, a small element, doming element, which is called Smith's Folly, which is an element which was added but removed. So, in itself, it has a lot of history behind it, from the Iltutmish period to the Tughlaq period to even the British playing with this concept. This minar, you could go up to the balconies. The balconies are made in such a way that again they don't obstruct the vision up top. Very sophisticated structure, in a way tapered also. Tapering means like this, so that I can see from this point each and every element in that regard. But it is indicative of two things. It was originally made for Azan, which is the Kuwaitul Islam Mosque is there. This minar was to give Azan, which is the call, the prayer call that you come and do prayer. But the problem is, if you are going to scream from 72 meters, nobody is as it was going to hear you, and you will most probably lose your throat. That is why they said that this was then abandoned as an, you can say, Azan Minar. It is considered to be an addition to the Kuwait Islam Mosque, but thereafter it became a symbol of the power of the Delhi Sultanate in that regard. So this is a concept which we had not seen previously. We had monumental vimans, we had a lot of elements, but something like this had not been created, which was also hollow, and you could go up the minar like this with proper ventilation. A major innovation in the architectural landscape of the Indian subcontinent. So this shows you how the masons, how the, you can say, um, the Raj Mistris, they were becoming more and more, you can say, comfortable with the way Indo-Islamic architecture was going forward. Now that comfort comes out in Iltutmish tomb. The reason why I'm showing you these elements is because if you will remember it via this, you will never forget it. Iltutmish's tomb, firstly, it had a dome which was created two times, but both time it got destroyed. This tells you that though the arch had been mastered, dome had not been mastered properly because it did not survive the monsoonal rains of Delhi. However, what is interesting about Iltutmish's tomb is we start to see the squinch emerging. The squinch structures are now being added, which means that they figured out the base, but they were not able to figure out the dome itself. And the arabesque within Iltutmish's tomb is in each and every inch, which means that the carvers had become experts in arabesque. You have the same Hindu elements along with geometrical design and Kufi being used, but by this point of time they had become extremely comfortable with the concept of arabesque and the whole structure and design in that regard. There's a very important point you have to understand, which is that we now see the Indian masons becoming more and more comfortable. Now, arabesque has reached to its highest point. The arch has become perfect, arabesque has become perfect, but the dome is still not perfect. Squinches have come through, and we've created a minar. Now, the element or the person who is going to, in a way, may, in the second phase, the highest point, the zenith, is going to come from Alauddin Khilji. Alauddin Khilji actually created a whole city. It is called Siri, but Siri fort area of Delhi. Siri does not survive, other than one mosque and one simple, you can say, wall which is there. Yes, Chirag, that is also true. No obstruction means that from this end to that end of the room, I can see without any pillars. You can see there's a camera in front of me and then there's a wall. So this whole structure has no pillars in the middle. That is called a non-obstructional understanding. So Alauddin Khilji's Siri did not survive, but the elements which he added, which he added in the form of these pillars. This is the iron pillar. In the form of these arches, still survive. Arabesque is the decorative technique of the Delhi Sultanate, which is based on Quranic verses plus geometrical designs plus Indian elements or Hinduistic elements. Now, why do I called Alauddin Khilji's period as the highest point of second phase? Is because of this. This is called Alai Darwaza, a darwaza which was actually added to the Kuwaitul Islam Mosque only. And this is the structure where we find the first true dome, which is scientifically made true dome. Whatever reconstructions which you see were done by Smith only. He was the one ASI, you can say, officer who reconstructed a lot of elements which were destroyed. But this has the iconic Alauddin arch, along with, if you go inside, a proper squinch, along with galley work, along with arches for load bearing. And that ways, it is a very beautiful structure made out of red sandstone with certain elements of marble. So, the true dome emerged in this period, and in a way, our second phase has reached to its highest point. Alai Darwaza, Siri is the city which he created, which does not exist. Siri is the city which does not exist. Alai Darwaza is an addition to the Qutub complex. This is the Alai Darwaza. They are different. They are different. So very simply, you have to understand that all of this is addition to the Kuwaitul Islam Mosque only. The whole Qutub complex is like this only. Red color means that they are using red sandstone. Red sandstone they are using because red sandstone carving is very easy. Carving is very easy, and these carvings allow for very beautiful designs to come through. So jali work, squinch, alai darwaza, first true dome, and Aladdin arch all come in this understanding. So when we talk about the second phase we had discussed that there will be, and we had consolidated true arch, true dome, arabesque, limestone mortar, trabeted structure. We will see highest point or maturing. The word which we'll use is the maturing of the arch in Iltutmish tomb, and maturing of Prudhomme in Alai Darwaza. In Alai Darwaza. Clear? Clear, everyone? Clear? Yes? Because then I move to phase 3. Got it, sir? Okay. Now when we talk about phase 3 is between Yasuddin Tughlaq tomb to Muhammad bin Tughlaq. And what we see is, and the phase 3 later element, we can see declining aspects. That is why architecture is studied as an element for both what is called as an understanding of political history, an understanding of art and culture, an understanding of economy also. So we will see within Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq to Muhammad bin Tughlaq, we will see a pure decline coming through. But Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq's tomb in Tughlaqabad, a structure. Tughlaqabad, a fort which was created by Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq, it has the following things which makes it the highest point. This is the highest point of, or the zenith of Delhi Sultanate architecture. First, second, third, fourth. Four points make it a very important. First is marble dome. The first time a marble dome was created. The other one is called batter, which is sloping walls for design. Third thing which is there is called beam and lintel. Beam and lintel use in doors and windows. And fourth element is that they created red sandstone plus marble combination in a very beautiful way. So if you look at this is Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq's tomb. This is phase 3. You will see all the elements which I've talked about. You will see all the elements which I've talked about, which is that we will see first the marble dome. You can see here marble dome. I consider no, not true shunya. Then we have this. You can see the sloping walls, or what we can write is barter. At the same point of time, we see use of lintel. This is called a lintel. And the use of red sandstone with marble is something which is important. Lintel is when you want to create a opening in a wall, you add a lintel. Beams are the columns which are load bearing. There are always beams in and around. You will see these are beams. A lintel is added as an element to create, you can say, an opening in a wall in that regard. So this is where architecture reached to its highest point. Architecture of Delhi Sultanate reached to its highest point. But if you will go beyond Yasuddin Tughlaq's tomb, this is Muhammad bin Tughlaq's tomb. And this is where you will realize they have moved away from red sandstone to what is called as gray sandstone. And gray sandstone is cheaper, locally available, and not very good for carving. So you will see a marked decline. Still, they're using the inverted lotus, a Hinduistic element. There's a marked decline in the quality of structures. And if you go down further, you will realize that the structures are called rubble architecture because they will start to reuse structures. And this is where phase 4 comes in. Phase 4 is where Firoz Shah Tughlaq created an ugly complex out of what is called as a declining phase. And declining phase, what we see is rubble architecture, which you will see in Firosha Kotla. They are still using lintel is nothing but if you have a wall, if Malvika is sitting in a room right now, it will most probably have a door in it. I hope so. And if it has a door, there is a small concrete slab structure which is added above the chokhat, above the door. That is called the lintel. Lintel distributes the weight. If you have a room with a window, it will again have a lintel like this. Lintel is basically a structure which is an element which gives space to create windows and whatever. There would be beams around you, and then there would be lintels wherever the doors would be. This is an element which Tughlaqs introduced. Now, as I was saying that this structure has still lotus, little bit of carving, but this is purely indicative of the decline of the Delhi Sultanate. Decline of Delhi Sultanate, which is that they are now creating structures which are made out of the rubble, the stones of the structures which this is where Siri was destroyed by the Tughlaqs. They used the walls, they used the structures to create something like this. So by the time we come to phase 4, we can see a marked decline. The architecture is also indicative of the level of development and the patterns of development in that. And this is a very interesting thing in that sense. So before we go to Vijayanagara, what have we understood? There are 4 phases. These 4 phases are based on phase 1 is reuse, phase 2 is innovation, phase 3 is highest point, phase 4 is decline. And arabesque, the concept of arch and dome, the concept of limestone mortar, and the ideas of barter, marble dome, beam and lintel, they have already been mastered. Vijayanagara Empire is 1336 onwards, and this is where that you can say element of mixing of temple architecture with Indo-Islamic architecture will happen, which we'll talk about. But before I go there, are we all clear about Delhi Sultanate? If, and I'll give you a practice question also here. If there's a question, and I really encourage you to write an answer for this, you can write it and put it in the comment section. For a mains answer, mains question, discuss the contributions of the Delhi sultans to the cultural history of India between 13th to 14th century, 250 words. This is a question which you should be now able to answer. Right? Are we on the same page? No issues whatsoever? Yes, sir? Okay. Now, Vijayanagara Empire, we are entering the second discussion which we will have. Vijayanagara Empire is based on the concept of temple architecture plus Indo-Islamic elements. And the most important feature of the Vijayanagara Empire is called Kalyan Mandap. Whilst the temple architecture is previously also the same, there are Kalyan Mandap, Rai Gopuram are two very interesting things which are linked to the Vijayanagara Empire. So Vijayanagara Empire had elements out of the Chalukyas also, Hoysalas also, Pandyas also, Cholas also, and also they picked up elements from the Indo-Islamic architecture. They had limestone mortar use. They were able to link up two to three different traditions together. The coloring scheme also of the Vijayanagara Empire had a very distinct, you can say, influence of the Delhi Sultanate in that regard. And Krishnadev Raya, the you can say the most important personality within the Vijayanagara Empire, created a lot of structures. But we would like to concentrate on the elements which are specific to them. This is Hampi, the capital of Vijayanagara Empire. The way they used limestone, the way they used the black basaltic rock, the way they used this gray, what is called as brownish sandstone and structural temples which were made. Very beautiful use of everything. Now there are certain elements which are specific to Vijayanagara Empire. Now see, Garbhagriha is not something out of the box. Having a mandap is again not something out of the box. Antartala again something not out of the box. But Raya Gopuram and Rang Mandap and what is called as Kalyan Mandap are very important. Kalyan Mandap is a ceremonial hall in which the deity is married on an annual basis. And Rai Gopuram are very big monumental Gopurams which were made. And they are called Rai because they were created by the Raya, which is the king of Vijayanagara Empire. So we see Rai Gopuram, we see Kalyan Mandap, we see Rang Mandap, and we also see what is called as a Shaila Shikhara, which is again barrel shaped. They are barrel shaped. You can say they had shikhars or vimanas if you want to call them, and this is again very specific to the Vijayanagara Empire. Vijayanagara Empire that ways was able to take temple architecture and Indo-Islamic architecture to a new level altogether. They also had this idea that used to add gopurams in all four directions. In all four directions, they used to add the gopurams in that regard. They further had an understanding that they will use the sandstone in such a way that they can create very big monumental structures in that regard. So these are terms which can be expected in the examination, which are linked to the Vijayanagara period. Vijayanagara period. So in our progression of history, Vijayanagar is an addition because it brings two elements together. Two elements together, which is something which was there in ancient India and something which is there in medieval India. Indo-Islamic architecture with temple intermixing in the Vijayanagar period. Now, moving ahead, moving forward from this story, Delhi Sultanate 15, you have 1206 to 1414. Then you have the Sayyids. People consider them parts of these. Three are considered Delhi Sultanate only, but they are not because Timur intervened in between. Sayyids 1414 to 1450. They had no real contribution architecturally. But the Lodhis beat Bahlul, beat Sikandar, beat Ibrahim between 1451 to 1526, which is first battle of Panipat. They introduced multiple elements which are today considered critical, are considered important in the larger scheme of things when it comes to architecture for the Mughals. So they basically created the base for the Mughal empire and introduced elements which are used in multiple spaces. Now let's talk about the contribution of the Lodhis to the architecture of medieval India. Can we do this? Everybody's on the same page with me, no issues whatsoever. Come on, perfectly fine. Yes, sir. Okay. Now, the first major development was the concept of a garden tomb complex. This you see in the form of the Lodi Garden complex. Lodi Garden complex is based on the understanding. Yes, local, I have given you all the major terms which are related to Vijayanagara. The Lodi Garden complex has Belul, Sikandar, Ibrahim, all in the same garden tomb complex, in the same garden. This is a very interesting element which the Lodhis introduced to create a garden complex in which you will have the what we call as uh, the tombs itself. Second is, and that is quite critical, is they are the ones introduced what is called as double dome. Double dome. Now, what do you mean by double dome? See, if you have a building with a very high dome, there will be what is called as echo. Acoustics are not correct. There will be too much echoing in the room in that. So, in order to tackle this issue, they started to have double domes. Double dome means that they used to make a shallower dome and then a bigger dome over it. So this becomes the ceiling, and this is from, for example, from outside it looks like it is 15 meters, but from inside this is only 5 meters and this is 10 meters. So double dome structures in the same dome having a shallow dome and having a bigger dome, this is called double dome. Double dome structures allows for the room to have a more lower ceiling. At the same point of time, the acoustics get properly sorted. Makes the structure more, you can say, sturdier also. This is an element which the Lodhi is introducing. The third thing which he introduced is Rajasthani Gujarati elements. This is very interesting. These elements were picked up from the Rajputs and was picked up from the Gujarat sector, and they will be introduced in the architecture. Now, what are the Rajasthani Gujarati elements which are there? See, one is called Chhatri. First one is called Chhatri. Chhatri means it is called a domed kiosk. Kiosk, which is, must have seen it somewhere for sure. This is called a domed kiosk. Something like this. Domed kiosk is it. This is a pure Rajput element with the inverted lotus on the top. It is a pure Rajput element. This is a element which was picked up from Rajasthani culture, Rajasthani architecture. At the same point of time, the second element is called Rajasthani balcony. Rajasthani balcony. Now, what is this concept of Rajasthani balcony? Rajasthani balcony, you have these type of balconies which you will see getting added to the structures for Rajasthani balcony. And third is called eaves or eaves, whatever you want to call it. These are protruding elements which are there as a way of adding some form of understanding. So, deductionist, they may have introduced it, but it did not get adopted within the what we call as octagonal shaped buildings is Lodhis. Lodhis are the ones who introduce octagonal buildings, not the Sayyids. I am coming to that only. That is the fourth point, which is octagonal structures. So, if you look at, for example, the Lodhi garden complex in that regard, you will see multiple elements which are quite interesting. The first is obviously the double dome here, but but with the lotus, inverted lotus. This is Hinduistic motif plus what is called as the double dome together. Then you have what are called as eways, and these are to give a certain aesthetic element. Then if you'll see here, you will see the Rajasthani balcony. You'll see the Rajasthani balcony here. And at the same point of time, if you go to Ibrahim Lodi's tomb, you will see the Chhatri also. But the lotus is an element which is there everywhere. This is a standard feature. And the fourth element is they started to create what is called as octagonal structures with double dome. This is again very, very important. So before the Mughals will come through, the Delhi Sultanate, the Delhi Sultanate, the Lodhis together will settle or create the foundation of Indo Islamic architecture, which is true arch was already there, true dome was already there, limestone mortar was already there, sloping walls had already been sorted, intricate decoration, which is arabesque, had already been sorted. Indo Islamic culture was becoming mature enough. You have double dome, you have Rajasthani elements, you have Chhatri, you have Eways, you have balcony, you have Batar, you have marble, red sandstone had become very common. And that way, if you look at it, that way is where you look at it, the whole structural elements have become settled in that regard. Very settled in that. It is very settled. They know the base is already created. Now, here, two types of questions can be made, which is one is obviously the contribution of Delhi Sultans. The other can also be the contribution of Lodhis. Lodhis. I can give you a question here for practice if you want, which is which is the period between the period between 13th to early 16th century, early 16th century was the foundational phase of Indo-Islamic architecture in the Indian subcontinent. 150, 250 words. Elucidate. Elucidate. This is a type of question which you can expect, which you can expect in the examination, and this will need a very good understanding of both Delhi Sultanate plus Lodhis. Plus Lodhis. Are we clear about this? Yes. Can we move to Mughals? Yes, sir. Hmm? Okay. Now, Mughals, we have the following major rulers. We will need another hour or so to sort this out. I hope this first 1 hour 15 minutes has been comprehensive enough, has created a good understanding, and I'm very exam oriented in that regard. I'm trying to give you everything in one place so that you can use it in a mains question, and also statement based questions should be sorted for you in the examination. Babar, Humayun, Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, and Aurangzeb. Now, Babar empire was not stable enough to add any element. We'll discuss this. Humayun, as it is, added no element because of Sher Shah Suri. Sher Shah Suri created the Sasaram tomb, which is quite celebrated and interesting, but it is it is not architecturally out of the box that way, other than an optical illusion. It is Akbar, Shah Jahan, Jahangir who together add multiple things which make the Mughal period the highest point of Indo-Islamic architecture. Highest point of Indo-Islamic architecture is in obviously Shah Jahan. But the idea is that Aurangzeb is the one from where the decline starts to go down. If the empire introduced a responsible fusion Indo-Islamic architecture, why do we not talk about Vijay? Vijayanagara, because Vijayanagar is not part of Indo-Islamic architecture. It is part of temple architecture of the medieval period. So for that, you would need a different type of question, which would be this is why I have written Indo-Islamic architecture here. If I write that the temple architecture of the medieval period started to absorb multiple Indo-Islamic designs and concepts discussed, that is where Vijayanagara is going to come. You have to understand why we have to write about Delhi Sultanate and Lodhis, because we're talking about Indo-Islamic architecture. Vijayanagara architecture is not considered to be Indo-Islamic. It is temple architecture with Indo-Islamic features. So this is a difference. From Lepakshi to Vithala temple, if you look at all of them, they are different. And then we have secular structures. So Shunya, what you have to understand is you don't write about, you have to categorize correctly. So you, in your question itself, you're writing temple architecture. But Indo-Islamic architecture would mean the Delhi Sultanate, Lodhis, and Mughals. I hope you understand this point. Why the categorization matters, why that term matters in that, right? Okay. So as I was saying, highest point of Indo-Islamic architecture is Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan. They add multiple elements. We will discuss that systematically. We already know that the foundation had already been laid. It is that they will take things further and make them more interesting. Now, when we talk about Babur's contribution with regards to architecture, he created two mosques, one at Panipat, one at Sambhal, and they both are more or less useless. More or less useless, nothing out of the box. But his one concept is important, which is called Char Bagh. Char Bagh concept, which was introduced first in Kabul and then introduced in multiple parts of India also. Babur's Panipat, Panipat Mosque has nothing out of the box. Standard arches, standard dome, nothing which is architecturally important. But the char bagh concept is quadrant based, one, two, three, four, and dividing the whole bagh into four quadrants, char bagh. This is very important. With waterworks, this is very interesting. It's very interesting because he comes from an area which is extremely arid. And because he is from an arid area, it means that he is yearning for, looking for greenery. So wherever he used to go, this is in Kabul. Wherever he used to go, he used to create charbags so that he had greenery and waterworks together. And keep on noting these points because somehow the Taj Mahal is the, you can say, highest point. It is the highest point of the whole concept, and it adds each of these elements together. Meaning, in Taj Mahal also you will see charbagh. Basically, this element will be taken forward by everyone. Now, when we talk about Humayun, Humayun again created two to three mosques, but Humayun did not actually add anything significantly to the architecture. Humayun's tomb was actually not created by Humayun, but Hamida Bano Begum, and it was created in Akbar's period. Therefore, it does not fall under Humayun's contribution. So, Humayun in this story does not really contribute anything. He gives Char Bagh. Humayun, too unstable an empire, Chausa, Kannauj, Sarhind, 15 years of interregnum. And by the time he comes back, only in 6 months he will rule and then he will die. So, Humayun, nothing really. But Akbar will create a tomb for him, or rather fund a tomb which his wife was creating, which is called Humayun's tomb. Now, Humayun's tomb is very, very, very important because a very important feature of Akbar, which was Persian plus Indo Islamic plus Hinduistic plus Rajasthani elements, all came together in the Humayun's tomb. Very beautiful structure, not talked about enough. Now, Humayun's tomb, you will see multiple things which were previously not known, or it's a, you can say, refinement on that understanding. First is this dome. This is a double dome. This is a double dome. The double dome of Humayun's tomb. Second is, you can see the Chhatri elements. The Chhatri elements. Then you see the Eways also. Thereafter, we see a very interesting concept. If I go back to, or if I have an aerial view, I see that it is in a quadrant, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. It's basically in a charbagh. So in the middle of the charbagh, they have created the tomb. And it is also on a raised platform. Raised platform, which is also called as arcaded halls and corridors. Arcaded halls and corridors. This is again a very interesting element. But if I go a little bit further towards the building, I see something very interesting, which is a Persian plus Hinduistic motif together, which is called the inverted lotus within the Star of David. Star of David is considered to be a very important element of Judaism, and sometimes it is also linked to certain, you can say, the star is not specific to Judaism. This element was also there within Hinduistic practices. So it is because the architect of Humayun's tomb came from the Safavid Empire, from Persia itself. It is believed that this was a very conscious decision which he took to add this element here. So the idea is that we have a stellate plan previously in Vesara style also. It is not that we don't have the star design, but it is believed that this is a Persianized influence in it. And therefore, if you look at the structure today, very beautiful charbagh is there. At the same point of time, raised platform is there, double dome structure is there, chhatri is there, eaves are there, but this is also an octagonal structure. And the way red sandstone is used with yellow sandstone is used with marble. This is again a very, you can say, interesting feature. And you can see the blue elements which are there. This is again Persian, you can say, influence. The using of blue. This is where Humayun's tomb is not talked about enough. But it is actually a building which is equally as beautiful and more, you can say, in a way, has a lot of elements which makes it very close to the Taj Mahal. Taj Mahal is an, you can say, evolution or refinement on the Humayun's tomb. And that is where you have to understand that this structure is a certain evolution from Delhi Sultanate to Lodi to Mughal. That is why Mughal architecture is something which UPSC tends to go into, because Mughal architecture is all the elements which we know till this point coming together. Now, Akbar's, you can see this chhatri, you can see this chhatri. This is the blue chhatri which I'm talking about. This is the standard chhatri which you see here. Both elements, Rajasthani Gujarati with Persian understanding. So, Akbar's contribution. Now, this is very important. This is very important slide for you. Akbar's contribution, if I list them down, if they're listed down, is predominantly, or rather, I'll say extensive use of red sandstone. First thing. Second thing, which is focus on strength rather than aesthetics. Third is a very important element which he only introduced, which is called four centered arch. Thereafter, extensive use of chhatri in structures. He loved the chhatri. Then, use of Persian elements. Thereafter, 4, 5. Then 6, it is the use of or revival of tributed structures. And we will see this in two places. First phase is Agra, which is Agra Fort. Agra Fort. We see this element in Lahore also, Lahore Fort. And we see it in the Allahabad Fort, now called Prayagraj Fort. Prayagraj Fort. And phase 2 is in Fatehpur Sikri. And in Fatehpur Sikri, there is multiple buildings which basically represent these contributions. Specifically, Buland Darwaza, the Salim Chishti tomb, Panch Mahal, and the Jodhabai Palace. One more interesting thing about Akbar was that he used arches as a decorative element, not generally as structural, meaning he started to add arches just to decorate the whole structure itself. Now let's try to understand these features: Ren sandstone, trabeted structure, the arches for decoration, decorative item, four centered arch. First is four centered arch. We see it in the Buland Darwaza. The four centered arch means that there's a certain depth to the arch. There's a certain depth to the arch, which is the arch is like made with a certain depth, and the weight is distributed at 4 points. That's why it's called four centered arch. As you can see, Buland Darwaza has a certain depth to it. Arches were previously made as one, you can say, element which was shallow, which had no concept of depth. It is it is an element which is made like this. End of story. What Akbar did was he added depth to the arches like this, and this is a four centered arch which Akbar introduced, and a very important element which is linked to Akbar only, who introduced it. Thereafter, if I go to Agra Fort, I will see another set of very important structures such as the Jahangiri Mahal, which is the only structure which survived from Akbar's period. Because Agra Fort, all other structures were destroyed by Shah Jahan. He did not like the structures and he made them into marble, from the Moti Masjid to the Diwane Am Diwane Khas. But if you look at the Agra Fort, it is made for power. It represents power. That is a very important point you have to understand. It is representing power. And the gate which is there, which you see here, if you go behind it, you will see that it is using octagonal pillars plus towers. You can see here octagonal tower. It has the Rajasthani balcony, and it is very extensive use of the chhatri. Akbar loved his chhatris. Chhatri so much that he will add the chhatri everywhere. This is Jahangiri Mahal. Jahangiri Mahal is the only structure which is surviving from the Akbar's period. And if you look at the Jahangiri Mahal, from inside, it seems like it is a temple structure. Trebeted structure is there. The concept of having a beam and a roof held by columns is something which Akbar brings back. An element which was previously known, but was not used during the Delhi Sultanate period too much. Was there, but not used. Now the Jahangiri Mahal, you can see how there are arches which are there just for decorative understanding, and the four centered arch is here also. But this structure is very, you can say, indicative of how red, yellow sandstone with a little bit of marble was used. So Agra Fort, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of elements which are now linked to Akbar other than the Jahangiri Mahal and the Agra Fort Delhi Gate, as it is called, because it faces Delhi. Whatever area it faces towards, it's called that only. Delhi Gate, Lahori Gate, whatever it is. Now, when I move to Fatehpur Sikri, I am then greeted with two to three interesting buildings. This is called the Jami Masjid. Now, if you look at the masjid, Akbar removed the idea that there is need for minars. So, in any of the mosques he made, minar was removed. And what he added was chhatri, chhatri, chhatri. Chhatri was added left, right, and center. The Rajasthani element for him was something he was obsessed with. But if you go inside the Jami Masjid, you will see motifs which are actually close to arabesque, which would mean that he's now using Hinduistic elements within a mosque also. which then shows you the syncretic tradition and the way Mughal architecture is bringing all of these things together. But if I look at Buland Darwaza, there is where I can see further the same concept. I can see arabesque, I can see the chhatris, I can see the aways. I am doing this because I'm trying to create a memory for you. I can just tell you, I can just give you this slide and we are sorted. We are more or less sorted. This is the slide which you need to know, this one. But I am showing you these things because if there's certain visual memory, you will remember it rather than just ratifying it. So do understand this point that these elements can also be learned through visual understanding. So the use of he was obsessed with the chhatri. The four-centered arch. This is the inverted lotus. The way he created this darwaza was to commemorate the victory over Gujarat. So it's a very interesting structure in that regard. Within, and if you go on the back side, again chhatri. Chhatri is something you'll find in every Akbar's building. Then you have what is called as Salim Chisti's Dargah. The Dargah, yes. Now, this was originally red sandstone. Shah Jahan did not like it, so he made it into marble. But Salim Chisti's tomb had an interesting understanding where Jali work was used extensively. Jali work was used extensively. And this structure was showing us that the way now masonry was happening, the way architecture was now being taken forward was very different, very interesting. And the show off factor of the Fatehpur Sikri comes from two: Jodhabai Palace, and second one is called Panch Mahal. This is where Akbar is now reaching to the highest point of red sandstone architecture, where he's created a structure where you have the Rajasthani balcony, you have the Chhatri, you have arches just for decoration, you have the Star of David again, Star of David with the inverted lotus. Along with that, you have very beautiful arches and red sandstone used in extensive way. But where Akbar was actually purely showing off was this Panch Mahal. Panch Mahal is a five-story structure, Panch Mahal, and each of these elements topped by a domed kiosk or a chhatri, each of the pillars of each of these stories was different. Meaning, he said, I should know which floor I am by looking at the pillar itself. Therefore, what is interesting is that by this point of time, the architects, the masons, and even Akbar was showing off. That is why red stone architecture has reached to a point where now they're in a space where they can make anything if they want. This is why when we go to Jahangir Shah Jahan, Jahangir represents. Till this point, everybody's with me. No issues with Akbar? No issues with Akbar? Come on. Akbar. Nothing? Okay. When we talk about Jahangir is a transitionary period. Jahangir is a transitionary period. What I mean by that is there is marble used with sandstone. This can be seen at Sikandra, which is Akbar's tomb. There is, you can say, a shift away from red sandstone. But the most important feature which Jahangir introduced was via Noor Jahan, which is called Pitredura, marble inlaying technique, which we see in Noor Jahan's father's tomb, the Itmat Uddaulah tomb. Nirmatuddaulah tomb. Charbagh, that is there. But Jahangir, this is Akbar's tomb. This is Akbar's tomb. And you can see that there are both elements now. Both elements now. The Minar is making a comeback, but it is marble. There's extensive use of yellow and red sandstone. You can see that the quality of arabesque has also improved. And obviously, if it's Akbar, it has to be Chhatri. So he basically, you can see that there's a transition. There's a transition. But why Jahangir's period is considered generally very important is because of this. This is Idmaduddaullah's tomb. If you go from Delhi towards Agra, it just before you cross the bridge over Yamuna, on the right hand side, there is Idmaduddaullah's tomb. In Idmaduddaullah's tomb, we find the first mention and also the first use of Peter Dura. Peter Dura is the way of how you take a certain marble, you start to carve into it, and then you create patterns into it in which you can push precious stones. So these are precious stones which are pushed in that manner. Peter Dura shows you that it is basically when you're creating a jali, but jali you can see through. Just before you are creating jali, you create a, you can say, mold. I create a mold like this, and then I can push into lapis lazuli, some form of very, you can say, a very semi precious stone, so that it looks very beautiful. Peter Dura, whatever you want to call it, is a very important feature which Jahangir introduced. Jali is when you have something like this. Jali, if you want to see, this is a jali. You see, this is a jali. This is a jali. It is a certain structure, marble pattern is there. You can see through it, right? So, Itmaduddaulah tomb, that was quite important. And Peter Dura, we've already discussed. Now, the most important, the highest point, obviously, was Shah Jahan, the overspender called Shah Jahan. Now, 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 when we talk about Shah Jahan, he has certain important contributions to architecture. First is extensive use of marble. Second is called nine cusped arch, which is called a Jahangiri arch. Then, yes, the deductionist, you can say that. Then you have the, you can say, culmination of all elements Taj Mahal, in Taj Mahal. The concept of arcaded corridors were also made very common. And the bulbous dome, the dome which has a stifled neck, this is called a bulbous dome. This bulbous dome was something which he will create. The bulbous double dome. And this is why Shah Jahan is considered the one who brought all elements together. This point links up with this point. So if I talk about the contributions of Jahangir and Shah Jahan, double dome, marble arcaded, you can say, corridors, arch, nine cusped arch, inlaying pattern, decorative pattern, Peter Dura, we've already discussed. Now, I have to show this to you. Shah Jahan's architecture can be seen in three places. One is Taj Mahal, then it is Shahjahanabad, which is nothing but Red Fort, and thereafter Jama Masjid. Now, at the time of Jahangir, there was a shift of focus shifting from architecture to portrait. Yes, that is true. Jahangir is more a portrait guy than an architecture guy. Now, the city of uh, Shahjahanabad, Red Fort, one of the most magnificent cities or most recent cities which was added to Delhi. Unfortunately, it does not survive in its original form because the British destroyed a lot of its elements after 1857. The Yamuna in the back, along with the very towering walls, only four original structures from the Red Fort actually survive. The first one being the Diwane-Am, Diwane Khas, Rang Mahal, and the Moti Masjid. Other than that, we have the outside walls of the Red Fort which survive. Now, if you look at the Red Fort, one thing which I want to point out to you is that this structure which you see here, yeah, this structure, this was not originally there. This is the original gate. This is added for the 15th August speech, but this is the original structure. This one. So this front element was added later, but you can see all the features of Akbar and Jahangir here also. Marble, red sandstone, the use of arches for decoration, the lotus elements, the Rajasthani balcony which was here, which has been closed now, Jali work which is here. You can say very big aways and Chhatri element with the what is called as nine cusp arch. I will show you what that means. See, this arch which you see here is called a nine cusped arch. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine. This is called a nine cusp arch. This is Jahangir's. This is Shah Jahan's arch. Anywhere you see this, it is Shah Jahan who basically topped by a lotus element. This is Shah Jahan's arch, and you will find it in these three buildings: Diwane Khas, Rang Mahal, Moti Masjid, and the Diwane Khas rather, Diwane Khas, Rang Mahal, and Moti Masjid. What is left is Diwane Am, which I will show you, which is in red sandstone. So, when you go to the Moti Masjid in Agra, which was created by Shah Jahan within Agra Fort, full marble dome, arcaded corridors, Chhatri is there. But what he's known for is this nine cusp arch, the Diwane Khas, where he used to meet. Again, Diwane Khas structures as Chhatri. He's using all the elements which are there previously. And then if you go to the Diwane Am, you have the peacock throne, which is mostly now just in ruins in that regard. But you see a very interesting element here. This is called a Bengali roof, very common in the Sena and Pala period. This is what Shah Jahan picked up from his movement in Bengal in that regard. And you will again find very beautiful nine cusped arches through which the whole arcaded corridor is made. This is called an arcaded corridor. Pillars are used, tribeted type look is given, but an arch itself is used to create a corridor in that regard. Very beautiful structure. But the culmination point, and remember this why Taj Mahal is Taj Mahal because it is the culmination point of Indo-Islamic architecture. It is a wonder of the world because no other building in this world has all the elements which we see from 1206 to 1526 to 1700 in that regard, though it was constructed in the 1600s, we'll say the 17th century in that regard. So it is a culmination point. Now, how is it a culmination point? Because if you will look at the Taj Mahal, You have the Charbagh, right? You have the Charbagh. This is a Babar feature, right? Thereafter, it is a bulbous dome. The bulbous dome, domed by a lotus, an element which was already sorted out. A minar, which we see previously. This is a very interesting optical illusion. These minars are made in such a sense that they are symmetrical. So if you look from the front, you can only see two at a given point of time. When you come closer, you'll see all four. Thereafter, it's an octagonal structure. Then we further see a raised platform. We see areas. We see arches for decoration. And if I go and zoom a little bit further, I see arabesque along with Peter Dury. And you can see the eways had become so extensive and so beautiful in that regard. So why is Taj Mahal so important? Is because it brings all elements of Indo-Islamic architecture. The four-centered arch is also there here. Four-centered arch. It is a structure which represents the highest point of Indo-Islamic. And Aurangzeb actually tried to copy it also. This is called Bibi Ka Makabra, Aurangabad. But the marble is cheap. It looks like a whitewashed building. The architect was not able to create it properly. It is a crooked building, teda a little bit. It is little bit like this, and it is not even close. There were two attempts to recreate the Taj Mahal. One Aurangabad Aurangzeb, the other one is called Safdarjung Tomb. Safdarjung Tomb in Delhi. Again, same type of structure. Both are called cheap copies of the Taj Mahal. But Aurangzeb again was too busy destroying temples at the same point of time. And also at the same point of time, he was fighting in Deccan for 8 to 9 years. He had no real time for architectural additions. Whatever structures he had, he made no changes in it. So no real contribution of Aurangzeb. So before we move to the Marathas, which is the fort complexes and military landscape, now a very simple, straightforward question can come, which is what is the contribution of the Mughals? What is the contribution of the Mughals? Now, if I bring all of these things together on one slide, we will have Babar, Humayun, Akbar, Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan. So I'm now consolidating this for you because it's the last major discussion which we have. Now, here, Babar, Charbagh, Humayun, no real contribution. Akbar, four-centered arch, red sandstone, riveted structure, and Chhatri use along with Persian influence and lotus plus star motive. Then Jahangir is Petre Dura transition from red sandstone to marble. Shah Jahan double bulbous dome, 9 cusp arch. The extensive use of marble usage, culmination of Indo Islamic architecture and arcaded corridors along with octagonal pavilions. And when we have Aurangzeb, we have what is called as decline phase. This makes sense. I think this has again been as comprehensive as possible. And again, if I wanted to give you a question, contribution between 16th and 17th century or Mughal emperors or individual can also come. This can come in the examination, right? So from Delhi Sultanate to Vijayanagara to Lodi to Mughal. Are we clear about this element? I need another 4, 5, 10 minutes maximum. We'll be finishing by 9. I want to just discuss the Maratha contribution, which is the military landscape. Everybody's on the same page with me, no issues whatsoever. All clear. Okay. Now, this is the element which recently got UNESCO tangible heritage tag also, which is one of the most important contributions, one of the most important contributions of the Marathas was that they were able to create a complex of complex of what is called as forts, and 12 such forts were recently recognized as the path breaking, you can say, architectural development during the period of 1630 onwards. Now you have Salher, Shivneri, Lohagarh, you have Khanderi, Raigad, Rajgarh, Pratapgarh, Suvarnadurg, Palhana, Vijayadurg, Sindhudurg, and Gingi. Only this is one which is in Tamil Nadu. All others are in the Maharashtra sector. Maharashtra sector. Now, the idea is very simple. You should know what is the characteristics of each of these elements, each of these buildings. So, for example, Salhar, Shivneri, Lohagarh, Raigad, Rajgarh, and Gingi are called hill forts, meaning they are made in hill complexes. This is a discussion which I've had previously also, but I want to make this discussion as comprehensive as possible so that we can complete everything here itself. Then we have Pratapgarh, which is a hill forest fort. Then we have Panhala, which is a hill plateau fort. Vijayadurg, which is a coastal fort. This is very important. And three very important, KSS, which is Khanderi, Suvarnadurg, and Sindhudurg. These three are what are called as island forts. They are called as island forts. And these forts, in that regard, were the backbone of the Maratha military and the Maratha navy, which is quite important in that way. And when we talk about Lohagarh, Lohagarh was a fort complex which was there previously also. It will be captured by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj in 1648. But it is a fort complex which was important to control the landscape and this whole sector. This hill fort was very, very important that way. Thereafter, Suvarnadug was one of the first, or you can say, one of the mainstay of the naval commander of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. His name is Kanoji Angre, and he used to operate from the Suvarnadurg fort from Adil Shah, and this fort became a mainstay to control the channels towards Maharashtra, Goa, and specifically controlling the Bijapur Sultan, the Ahmednagar sector, and also later the Portuguese and the English. Then you have Sindhudurg. Sindhudurg again, foundation was laid in 1664. It will be a very important fort because it was on the trade route of the Dutch, Portuguese, French, and English. So this was constructed in order to check the movement of the Europeans in this sector. That was quite important. That was quite interesting. Vijayadurg, on the other hand, is the supplying fort, which is the concept of a coastal fort, which gets connected to these three island forts. This is the one which supplies to the seas. Vijayadurg is one of the most beautiful because it is against the beach itself, has a lot of, you can say, very good landscape in that regard, but was a very important, you can say, uh, fueling station along with uh, reinforcements to Swarnadurg, Sindhudurg, and Khanderi used to go from here. So again, very very important. Created not by the Marathas, by the Paramars, later taken by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Then Khanderi is the last. You can go to Khanderi from Mumbai, from the Gateway of India. You can go to Khanderi. This is again the last, the three Khanderi, Suvarnadurg, Sindhudurg. Together, they create a complex web, which in a way, allows for the movement to be controlled and mainstay against the Deccani Sultanates in that regard. Right. So this is, yes, for UPSC. It is a Vijay Durg is also the name which has been recently given to Fort William in that regard, but that's a separate issue altogether. Now, Panhala is a fort which again controlled by the Bijapur Sultans. Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj will take it. Important to control that whole Western Ghat sector, and an important fort generally because of its location. But the most important in that constellation is Pratapgarh. Why Pratapgarh? Pratapgarh allows for you to control the Par Pass within the Western Ghats, and the river Neera and Koyna rivers go from the both sides of this, what we call as fort. This allows you to control a very important pass, which from Konkan to the Vidarbha sector, from the Konkan to the interior of Maharashtra, you need to go to the Par Pass, and there's a very important fort in that sense. Then Salher was again is now in the news quite a lot because it's become a new trek. This is the most difficult fort to breach. It is on the second highest peak of the Sayadri Mountains itself. Very difficult to breach because it's a vertical climb straight. And if you're sitting on the top, it is very difficult to, in a way, breach this generally. Then Shivneri is where Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj was born. Very important, you can say, fort because of its historical relevance. And then two forts which are the capitals. First is Rajgarh. For 26 years, it was the capital under Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, and then it will shift to what is called as Raigad. Remember this, very close names. So sometimes it will become very difficult to differentiate between the two. Raj, Rai, you should know the difference also. Then comes the last major fort which is there, which is Gingi. Gingi or Gingi is very, very important because it is the only fort in Tamil Nadu of the Marathas, and it is a fort which had a certain element above the hill also and below the hill. And if you look at the landscape for at least 5 to 10 kilometers, you can see the movement of the enemy in that regard. So it is a very difficult fort to breach because the you can see the enemy coming from very far away in that regard. So Gingi, called the Troy of the East, is considered one of the best in that regard. Now, again, in this, you cannot expect a mains question, but a prelims question for sure. It can come through. They can ask you these forts, their characteristics. Generally, a question can be made on this in that regard. Now, with this, we complete the architecture. I do this in class in much more detail, which would be, I would take another 2.5 hours. It is a 3.5 hours, 4 hour discussion. But I've tried to be in as, you can say, concise but extensive at the same point of time so that your architecture portion is done. This 2 hours is a good enough time, and I think an efficient time to cover this. Re- save this, save this, you can say, element. Sikhs, it is mostly borrowed architecture power. So it is a lot of Indo-Islamic architecture plus use of a lot of marble. So not that significant in your preparation generally, but it's both Indo-Islamic elements plus the concept of marble. So save this file. I will obviously take, I want two suggestions from you. I have to cover two static concepts. What do you want me to cover? I have previously covered temple architecture and UNESCO in what is called as tangible heritage sites. Please comment what are the things which we can cover under two static, which you want me to cover. Second is the idea that if I am doing another marathon, what topic you want me to do it? Should I do the architecture of ancient and early medieval, or should I do something else which you think is worth your understanding? 2.5 hours I want to push in that. And architecture wise, this is done. Bhakti is not a topic for 2 hours, 2.5 hours. It's a topic of 1.5 hours. But the idea is, you just comment in the comment section. I will see to it that if there's a consensus which is building up with all of you, this is for everybody who's watching this in recorded fashion also. If there is anybody, if there's a consensus which builds up, I will follow that for you in that regard. So I hope that the past 2 hours have been fruitful. It is comprehensive enough. Use these you can say elements to write a good answer. I have given you everything in the best way possible, right? I will see you all very soon. Another set of issues, another marathon. Some of you in the morning class at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you. Take care.